All right, welcome back to another episode of Blown Coverage. I'm Mike Bell with my co-host Caleb Schwoyer. We're done with another week of college football. We missed a preview episode, but at least if we're going to miss a preview episode, we missed, what was kind of there were less big games, but nevertheless, we do have a few to discuss. I don't know how you felt about this week, but this almost felt like instead of its own week, it was like the week before next week. Like that's kind of how I thought about it. It's like the week before the big week, not just because A&M Texas, but just because a lot of big games are next week, and there were less games this week. But I don't know how you felt. Obviously, you had Texas Arkansas, and I say maybe we just start there. What were your thoughts on the weekend in general, and then why don't you go ahead and tell me your thoughts on that game?
I mean, they were really, I don't know, maybe you could say like three. So you had the USC Oregon game, good matchup. And then you had Oklahoma, Missouri, which was also a really good matchup. And then honestly, I didn't expect Tennessee to like do 31-0 against Florida. But anyway, that was another good matchup. And then I guess you could throw Texas, Arkansas in there. So kind of a mix of rivalry games, I guess you could say. But as far as the Texas Arkansas game goes, obviously Arch had a really good game. Um, yeah, I just feel bad because he was 18 of 30 yesterday, but really and truly, a couple people dropped the ball, and some of it was like kind of misplaced on Arch's part, but some of them were just kind of right there in the hands. I guess the concerning thing about the game was like we still weren't really able to run the ball effectively. So that's a problem for sure. I figured we could at least have had more of a run game against Arkansas, but we didn't. I feel like our defense did a relatively good job against Arkansas just because that's all they've done is score points, and their offense is really good. Their quarterback went out, and actually their redshirt freshman quarterback came in and he did pretty well. Most of the time that he was in there, or maybe 40% of the time he was in there, was against black backups and stuff like that. But still, that's hard to go into. So anyway, overall, pretty good game. I was happy. I was excited about it. So, but yeah, that was my thoughts on the game. Really, actually, I take that back. What really sucks is Anthony Hill's hurt. I expect he'll be back though for the A&M game. But Ty Anthony Smith, who is a younger linebacker, very good thumper, got a my goodness, what's that called? Just left my
Stinger?
head. Huh?
Stinger?
No.
Are you talking about a targeting?
Yes. So he's going to be
Yeah.
out the first half against you guys, which I think could be a little problematic. So that aspect or that sucks, to be honest. But anyway, hopefully Anthony Hill should be back so we can maybe get by. But anyway, other than that, that's pretty much all my thoughts on the game.
Yeah. So, it's funny. Every Arkansas game, every Arkansas game to me kind of looks the same, and that is that they're going to score. It just doesn't seem to matter the defense unless you're Notre Dame somehow. And they're going to make it close. But even when they make it close, when they actually have an opportunity to do something, that is when they're going to shut down and they're not going to score, or they're just going to fumble the ball or something. And that was kind of the case with Arkansas. It's 21-20. They have an opportunity to go ahead. And of course, that's the time they don't move the ball. Now, granted, Arkansas had a running back depth problem in this game. And both their running backs have been very good. And at one point, Washington went out of this game. He came back
Yeah.
in. And, that's a big deal, but it just doesn't matter. Like, they move the ball. That's just what they do. And then defensively also doesn't matter. The other team, no matter the offense, is going to move the ball on them. And it's kind of what I expected. Yeah, I was surprised Texas didn't run the ball a little better, but I kind of think they just didn't have to. And they could there were just so many guys open down the field where Arch just had to throw it and hit an open guy, and he did. And it reminded me honestly of watching the A&M game versus Arkansas in a way in terms of the Texas offense, because I had questions about A&M's offense coming into the game, and then it just doesn't matter. Against Arkansas's defense, you're going to move the ball every single time. But it could be good in the sense that it just gives your players some confidence. It's like, okay, we're hitting open guys. So I think that's good for Texas and obviously for Arch Manning and all that. But, Arkansas, everyone says it and they say it every week, but if they could just put together a defense, they could have been a scary team. But they're 2-9, and it just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, so yeah, I did not realize that about the Texas linebacker situation. So that will be something to watch moving forward. But obviously, a big game next week. So let's see. I imagine you didn't get to watch a lot of the USC Oregon game. Am I right on that?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, no.
Okay. What other game would you say you paid the most attention to?
Missouri, Oklahoma. That game was a pretty good matchup. I think two pretty good defenses. I wouldn't necessarily say too much of a struggle. Missouri's offense has been struggling kind of throughout the year just because of the quarterback situation. Prabula going out, but he came back. This was his first game back in like several going against OU defense, so that was pretty hard for him to go back to. OU's defense is just really good, and just with each week progressing after the hand surgery, John Materius looks better and better. Trying to think, I think it was 23 to, I forgot what the final score was, but
17-6.
okay, yeah. So it's kind of scary. Here's the deal, though. I still think Missouri has a really good run game, considering that's pretty much all they've been able to do the whole year, and people know that. So it's like they can just stack the box against Missouri and not really have to defend the pass too much. And they're still able to have a pretty good run game. So I think that's pretty impressive, to be honest with you. But Oklahoma is just looking more and more like a really good playoff team, kind of like I thought they looked at the beginning of the year before the Mateer injury. So I thought it was pretty. That was a good win for Oklahoma for sure, because I don't think Missouri is a soft team at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say this game kind of went as expected. You had two
Yeah.
good defenses, and it was kind of strength on strength in a way.
Hmm.
And I did think Missouri was going to be able to do a little bit more. Obviously, Bull Prabula coming back, and he can do some things. He's better than their other quarterback for sure. Obviously, big step up. He
Yeah.
just and look, you can't fault him too much because he is going against OU defense, but he's kind of looked the same every game, and that is he'll make a few plays with his legs, but you really can't trust him to throw the ball. I just do have to say, and I said this after the A&M game as well against Missouri. I, I get that it's Missouri and they're having a good year for Missouri, but I actually questioned their coach. What's his name? Eli Drinkwitz. That's the Missouri guy,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Look, I get that is their strength to run the ball, but my God, like they got to do something different. Like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
weren't going to score that way versus OU. They needed to mix it up more, and they just
Yeah.
didn't. And yeah, I think Missouri is kind of a disappointment, to be honest with you. OU, I agree with you. They're looking like the team in the playoffs you don't want to face, no matter who they're against. I'd like to see Notre Dame, Oklahoma. I think that'd be a great game. But
Yeah.
they can. They're never going to be a dominant offense, but they may be able to do just enough, especially versus the right matchup. And their defense is going to keep them in every single game.
Oh, for sure.
So they're a team to watch. It's pretty amazing. We've talked about it, what they've been able to do, considering. I mean, it looked like they were maybe facing a 7-5 season after that loss to you.
Yeah. However, I would like to say like they had the. I remember like after the OU Texas game, their remaining schedule looked like holy crap, this is going to be a gauntlet. And by all means, was it easy? No, but some of those teams have kind of like fizzled out and stuff like
For
that.
sure.
So it definitely was. It wasn't hard of a schedule as it appeared to be, but you can't fault OU for that because that's just kind of how the cookie crumbled this year. But they still look good. And to your point, I think they can do just enough on offense, especially depending on who they play against. Their defense will keep them in every game. I think no matter who they play. To be honest with you, um, I'm just curious about John Mateer's durability during the playoff because I feel like during the playoff you have to run. Like I just feel like it's almost a necessity. You have to be able to do something in the run game and just
Hmm.
somewhat be balanced. And the only way OU can do that is just running Mateer. And so that is, I think, the big question is how long can Mateer be durable in the playoffs?
Agreed, and I agree on the schedule. Like, there's no denying it because obviously Missouri having their troubles, and then LSU is a team that barely beat Western Kentucky yesterday. So I get that, but hey, at the end of the day, they went to Alabama and won. So
Yeah.
that's big for them.
Oh,
But
for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, so they're going to be an interesting team to watch, and I'm excited to see what they do in the playoffs, assuming they don't just drop a random one next week to LSU, which you never know. You never know about.
Yeah. Last game, pride thing or something.
Right. So next game, this was obviously the game of the week, USC Oregon. I don't know how much of it you were able to watch. I watched the whole thing, and it was kind of a weird game in a sense because it felt like Oregon was just on a tier above USC, but at the same time, USC kind of found ways to just stay in the game enough to not get blown out. But to me, I thought you saw a difference in tiers. Like I do think Oregon's just a bit better than USC at the moment. They were able to run the ball very well, which was expected. Oregon, I'm talking about. And I tell you what, I mean, I thought he's been good all season, but after really watching him the last 2 weeks, Dante Moore, he's eligible to be in the NFL draft this year. I hope he doesn't do that, but
I think that'd be
watch
very
out for him.
stupid of him.
Yeah, watch out for him next year because he's been
Yeah.
making some big time throws, and he's been very, very impressive to watch. Obviously, Maava for USC was good. It felt like Oregon kind of kept USC in this game a little bit more than necessary because there were some ill-timed kind of turnovers, just kind of bad plays. But yeah, USC, you kind of say it with them every week, and maybe for the past couple of years, they just have run defense issues. If they could clean that up, it would be a lot better. This is a team I would be concerned about next year, concerned in a good way for USC because they're going to have some returning players. They've got a great recruiting class coming in, but USC winning would have caused some chaos scenarios in the college football playoff. And Oregon, this was kind of an elimination game. If they would have lost, I think there's a good chance they would have been left out of the playoff. But with a win, now they have to go to Washington, and that will be interesting. Not an easy game, but it
Mhm.
looks like Oregon kind of uh, bought themselves into the playoffs a bit. So fun game to watch. Oregon pulls it off. Do you have any closing thoughts on that game, or do you want to move on?
Well, I wasn't able to watch too much of it just because the Texas game was on during that time. You know, my question is, how is Lincoln Riley not able to fix that defense? Just especially with the NIL going on. Like USC's got pretty deep pockets, and I mean, if I don't know, that's the thing that's obviously holding Lincoln Riley back. Just going back to even Oklahoma is just the defense. Yeah, I mean, if he could have just a serviceable defense, man, USC could be a dangerous team for sure. Um, So I know they have like a good recruiting class coming into. I think it's honestly number one. I was wanting to verify
I
that
think
real
so.
quick before I said that, but um, anyway, I and maybe they're kind of digging into those pockets a little deeper for them to be able to have the number one class, but you got to stack that stuff up, man. And for whatever reason, Lincoln Riley hasn't done that. Their offense is fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but um, I don't know. I still think he's underachieved. And by the looks of it, basically all USC could do yesterday was pass. Not run at all. And that Oregon was able to have a well balanced offense, like you said, Dante Moore. He looks good. I think it'd be stupid of him to go into the draft just because this being his first year to actually start the whole year. And well, hold on, I take that back. Did he play? Did he start at UCLA? I can't remember if
Dante
he did
Moore?
it. Huh? Yeah, Dante
Who?
Moore. Yeah,
I don't remember.
yeah. I don't know off the top of my head either. This is the first time I want to say this is his first year to start, but I could be wrong. Anyway, yeah, he needs to come back for sure, and then he probably would be a top draft pick for sure as long as he kept on the progression trail. Because just remember Carson Beck, everyone was really hot on him about a year or two ago, and then all of a sudden now he's I wouldn't say he's like falling off the deep end, but um, he is not as highly sought after as what he was. So anyway, the other big game, or the not big, but I'd say the other interesting game, like going into it before it happened, was a Florida Tennessee game, just because Tennessee 7-3, ranked 20. Florida, what were they? They're now 3-8, I think, or something. Or yeah, I think they're 3-8 now, if I'm not mistaken. It could be. Let me double check myself. But anyway, for Tennessee to go into Gainesville, beat Florida 31-0 for the first time since 2003, which I thought was actually pretty surprising. That was a good win for the program for sure. And I don't know if you knew this, but Aguilar, the quarterback for Tennessee, 25 consecutive games he's had 200 passing yards, which is pretty crazy, to be honest. That's pretty hard to do, and obviously not all of this was at Tennessee. It was at his previous school. But anyway, I don't know if you got to watch that game or not. Did I say 31-0? 31-11. Apologize. Most of the game that I was watching was Florida was on, you had 0 points.
Yeah, so Florida second half of the season here is just falling apart, which I think maybe to be expected a little bit because at some point, I mean, look, they fired their coach, they've lost
Yeah.
hope. What do they have to play for? It really isn't the same Florida as first half Florida. Not that first half Florida was great. They obviously had their issues, but I did expect them to play a little bit better, just being that, hey, we've beaten Tennessee here every time since 2003. They have pride to play for. And admittedly, I only got to see the first half of this game before I turned it off. But Tennessee, I mean, that's all I needed to see. They scored all their 31 points. It was 31-0 at the half. And I mean, Tennessee was just dominating. And it was good to see because, one, it sets up a big matchup next week, Tennessee versus Vandy. And
Yeah.
that's going to be a ranked matchup, rivalry game. And there's some playoff implications for Vanderbilt. I don't know if they're going to get in, but nevertheless, it'll be talked about. They're going to talk about it if they win. So it sets up a big game. I'm curious to see how both teams do against each other. And yeah, so credit to Tennessee going into that road environment at night. That is a tough place to play and taking care of business. They're playing very well right now. So I am excited for that matchup that we're going to see at the end of the season. So that's kind of my thoughts on the game. I would say, do you have anything else on that?
No, no. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting for Florida next year, though, but just because they do have some key players. I'm curious to see who is going to transfer out. I'm curious to see if DJ Lagway will stay there. I think that is a big question.
Yeah, that is.
Um, you know, I'm curious how Florida's going to go about that, right? Because I think if DJ Lagway were to leave, that'd just be like a huge momentum killer. Because at least like right now, heading into the next year, DJ Lagway, third year quarterback, and obviously I know he hasn't necessarily looked the best. They have some pieces. They're young. Just I don't know. I think it's just going back to a coaching thing at this point because with as much talent as they have, I mean, the only logical thing for me to think about is just, okay, this is just coaching. Like maybe they're just not like, it's a systemic thing, I think. So, but they have some really good freshman players. Like their running back Ball, very good. That guy's going to be a stud in a couple years. And then they have some really good wide receivers. Okay. Defense, I'm not really too sure off the top of my head as far as those players go, but I remember they had gotten some pretty good defensive players in the last couple of recruiting classes. So whoever lands that job, I think as long as they retain some of the key players that they have on offense, they won't necessarily be a push around, maybe around a 500, which that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing per se. I know that would suck for the Florida fans, but hey, you're 3-8 this year. It seemed like, I don't know, you just let go of a 500 coach. And interestingly enough, they showed on that game last night the last five Florida coaches. I think since 2000 and whatever year it was, Florida's had 8 coaches or something like that, which is the most in FBS, which I was like, holy crap, that's actually insane. I didn't even realize that. But pretty much every coach, aside from Dan Mullen, was 500. I think Will Muschamp was like 28, 21, 28 wins, 21 losses. Everybody else was like right around the 500 record, and I was thinking about that. Dan Mullen, it's not like you didn't necessarily question, I don't know. I think that was an example of maybe a program getting rid of a coach too quickly, because now you see where the program's at now. I'm pretty sure if they could retract what they did and just let Dan Mullen continue on for a couple more years, they definitely would have. And it'd be interesting to see where Dan Mullen would have had Florida. I'm not going to say that they would have won a championship, but it wouldn't necessarily be in the dumpster probably like it is now.
Right, and I think that's one reason they're so desperate to get a guy like Lane Kiffin, which that is certainly an interesting storyline to talk about. We don't have to talk about it now. I feel
Yeah.
like that may be too big of a tangent, but look, they're looking for the guy. I would also say for Florida, you can't discount, especially the last 2 years, and this is why I feel bad for Napier. That schedule has been brutal,
Yeah, it
and
has. It
when you
has for
start
sure.
off so bad, it's hard to
Get the momentum.
play at the
Yeah.
same level. Whenever you have those early losses, I'll never forget A&M. I've said so many times we've had some great teams that did happen to go 8-4, but there was something about we would get to like the 6-0 point every year, and then that seventh game each year was Alabama during the middle of the Alabama dynasty, and something about that just seemed to kill A&M's momentum. And there is just something about facing those losses early on that does something to your psyche. So I
Yeah,
think for Florida, they've had that issue. So it is. I think college football is better with a good Florida. So I do hope they figure that out.
for sure. Um, Something else we could briefly speak on to an extent would maybe be James Franklin getting hired at Virginia
Oh
Tech. I
yeah.
think that was very interesting. Uh, I'm honestly surprised he took the job. I don't know what ultimately made him decide to do that, but just because our previous conversations, I think that he could have gone to a better school for sure. But I am interested in Virginia Tech and how they do now. And Brent Pry, the coach they just fired, was his defensive coordinator for a little bit. So I'm curious if he would rehire him as a defensive coordinator, just out of curiosity, or anyway. But I'll be watching Virginia Tech. I remember when we were probably in junior high, like the 2008 to 2014 or 13 year period. Virginia Tech was old, and I know in the 2000s they were every year they would win 10 games or something like that. But I remember going for Virginia Tech around that time period. They had I want to say Tyrod Taylor was there, and they always had a really good running back that I really enjoyed watching. So I don't know. Maybe it's kind of like an underdog in the ACC thing that I was going for, or which made me root for them. But anyway, I thought it was interesting. So
It was interesting. Obviously, if you're Virginia Tech, you're very excited because that's as good as you're ever going to do in terms of a coach. It will be interesting to see if he can kind of
oh
bring
yeah,
back that program. Reasons why he may have done it, because you're right, he probably could have got a technically better job. I still think Auburn would fit him, but I was
oh
thinking
yeah,
I think maybe you brought this up last time. It has something to do with recruiting. He has better
yeah,
recruiting resources up there. He knows more people kind of in that area. Another thing could be, let's face it, the ACC has been bad. So he's
yeah.
got less competition.
Easier path to success,
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah,
easier path to success. And I imagine he could do that there. Just make Virginia Tech competitive. That's all they want. If they go eight
Yeah,
and four every year, all he has to do is kind of get there. And then if he wants another big job after that, I imagine something will line up for him. But yeah,
yeah,
I think that had something to do with it. It's just the path of least resistance because that's the thing with jobs like Auburn. Auburn, especially with the schedules now, their two rivals they have to face every year are Alabama and Georgia, and that's just
yeah,
two of them in the SEC. So that's tough. That's tough. It doesn't matter how good of a coach you are. That is going to be a very tough path every year.
yep,
So in that sense, it makes sense. And another talking point that you're seeing, and I wonder if this is going to minimize coach firings at all, but you're seeing a lot of head coaches stay with their teams this year and not leaving. And we're yet to see what Lane Kiffin does. I saw
yeah.
today that I think he probably is leaving, but he could be doing like a massive troll job and just is going to stay with Ole Miss and is just delaying the LSU and Florida coaching search. And that could be all he's doing. I kind of think he's going to LSU, but that is something to think about, I guess.
They
Yeah,
made this interesting talking point on game day, and I was like, wow, that's actually very interesting. Um, Chris Fowler, or not Chris Fowler, there was another guy. I always forget the guy's name on game day, but it's not, it's
Reese
the
Davis.
older, huh?
Reese Davis.
Yes, Reese Davis. He made the comment of like, if Lane Kiffin were to stay at Ole Miss and, just continue what he's doing there, like what he has been, there's potential that they may put a statue of him up there just because of what he's done for the program. If he goes to LSU or Florida, they probably wouldn't do that. And I mean, because if you think about it with LSU, Nick Saban, does he have anything there? No. Does Orgeron have anything there? No. Does who was the other guy? Les Miles. I know he. No, Les Miles doesn't have anything there either, if I'm not mistaken. So more than likely, no matter what Lane Kiffin did, even going to win a national championship, probably wouldn't get anything. There's just something about him and Ole Miss. Like there's just like I don't want to say father of Ole Miss by any means, but for the first time in, like they said, decades. I mean, I know Hugh Freeze kind of had his couple years where Ole Miss was like really good and everything like that, but I think because of recruiting tampering or whatever happened, I kind of forget, but they took all those wins away or something. I don't know. They view Lane Kiffin as like a not a godsend, but something to that effect, just because of what he's done for the program. Ole Miss is you could almost put them on par, I think, with Auburn. Are they the like an elite SEC school? No, but with the right coach, they could be very good, which is exactly what Lane Kiffin has turned Ole Miss into.
Agreed. The thing is for Lane Kiffin, like, what if that's his dream job is LSU or Florida? So it,
Yeah,
it, it probably is tougher to recruit. Now, I don't know how much tougher it is with the. Okay, so this is just coming off from Josh Pate on X. He says, "I know where Lane will be in 2026. All I can say is wow." So that's interesting. But I was just gonna say, it just depends on what Lane Kiffin's personal ambition is. He might just think he's kind of maxed out Ole Miss. The thing
yeah.
that sucks for him is he's kind of led Ole Miss to a great spot this year, and he's probably going to have to leave Ole Miss if he does accept another job.
Yeah,
He
well,
can't.
exactly, and that's what they also talked about that there too, because that leaves them in a tough situation. Like, what about the players? I mean, we talked about this last week too. I mean, they're in the playoff, man. I mean, they're in the playoff.
That's
Probably.
interesting. So, I got to interrupt you there. Are there? What if they lose to Mississippi State?
Well, I was
They're
about
number
to.
six right now. There's going to be a logjam of two lost teams, and
Yeah,
they're going to have to choose. I think they're probably in, but that's something to think about.
yeah, I think so. And they were having this debate on College Game Day. If he were to take a job right now, should Ole Miss allow him to keep coaching? And in my opinion, I think yes. If Lane
Hmm.
Kiffin wanted to, just because I don't know, man. I don't think you're there without him for sure. And so don't mess up the groove that you're in. It just kind of puts the situation for the players kind of sucks just having to deal with this. So
Agreed. Okay, so now we have kind of gone on a tangent on coaching jobs, and I mean, fair enough. But we do have a couple of games to talk about here. As far as last week, big one. I watched again just the first half. The late games, I kind of just turned it off, admittedly. But Pitt beating Georgia Tech blew them
Yes,
out.
that's sucked. Yes,
Big for the ACC.
good
Big
for
for
Texas, but yes,
Well, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if it is actually because the problem is that creates more of a log jam for two lost teams,
yeah,
and
that's true.
that's the thing. So in Georgia Tech next week does face Georgia. That will be a fun game. But as far as the ACC goes, we're approaching more and more an ACC doomsday scenario where we may not see an ACC team in the playoff. It might happen, but I don't know who the winner of that conference is going to be, but you're facing a weird case where Miami may be the highest ranked team in the ACC, yet they will not be in the ACC title
Yeah.
game. It's looking more and more like it will be. So Pitt faces Miami next week, and that's going to be a
Oh yeah.
really interesting thing. I don't think Miami can get in unless a lot of other teams lose. I'm talking about the ACC title race, but I don't know what's going to happen there in the ACC, but it was the best case for the ACC was Georgia Tech winning out, and now they have not, and they're looking very much like they're
And I
going to be a
hate
three
that
loss
too.
team.
I hate that too.
I hate it as well, yeah, because Georgia Tech was kind of a team I believed in, and it was going to be good for probably the ACC if they were to win out, but not happening. And Pitt, by the way, looked really good. I think, by the way, this game shows you maybe how bad the ACC is
Yeah.
because Pittsburgh kind of handled Georgia Tech, and last week they got handled by Notre Dame.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
And I know. Yeah. Uh, my question is like, how good of a team is Pittsburgh? I don't know because they, like you said, one week they get rammed, the other week they ram. And so does that diminish the Notre Dame game against them? I don't really know, but anyway.
yeah, I do have to bring up Notre Dame briefly. I don't know if you were keeping track of this, but they won
Oh,
7-7,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I did see like with 3 minutes into the game, Notre Dame was like up 21-0. They only had the ball, I think, five like for they only had like five offensive plays the entire first quarter, yet they were up 21-0.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was just there was an interception, a quick fumble, and then I think it's a special teams thing. But I just got to say, I would probably say Mendoza is my favorite for Heisman, but I think Jeremiah Love should be number two. I just think the dude is so good. 8 carries, Caleb.
Yeah, I
Eight
see
carries.
that.
That was
Yeah.
it. 171 yards, 3 touchdowns. Like, I think he's incredible. I think he's just absolutely incredible. And I'm worried for Notre Dame because if Miami wins out, the committee's gonna have a tough time
Oh
with
yeah,
that
because
ahead.
Miami's got the edge over them. Yeah.
Yeah, but boy, Notre Dame should be in the playoff. I mean, they're just so freaking good, and that's gonna be interesting. We'll see what happens, and yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about that. Quickly, Wisconsin. I don't know how they're doing it, but they have been awful, and then they beat Washington, and then now they beat Illinois, and they rushed
They've
the
had a
field.
brutal schedule as well. Like that's a I don't know what the record is right now, but I do know that like people often debated this year if Wisconsin or Florida had like the toughest schedule in college football. Not to say like maybe all I'm saying is just give Wisconsin a little grace, despite their record. They're probably a better team than what that shows, just because of who they've played. Let me pull them up real quick. Just go over that. Continue with what you were saying.
Well, I was just going to say it's too bad for Illinois because they have been a pretty good team this year,
Yeah.
but winning at Wisconsin is one you need to win. I understand Wisconsin's had a tough schedule, and hey, at the end of the day, they pulled off some good wins, but I remember in the middle there, like they were just very bad. But maybe they figured something out here in the second half, and that could be good for them next year
Yeah.
to get some momentum.
Let me read you this schedule. Probably off the top of my head, the only Big Ten school that's had this hard of a schedule, or like I don't even know if anybody compares to it. Alabama week 3, at Michigan week 5, at Iowa the next week versus Ohio State, next week at Oregon, next week at Washington, next week at Oregon versus Washington, at Indiana versus Illinois. So like all the top teams in the
That's
Big
tough.
Ten. That is insane.
It is. Yeah. So credit
So
to them
and
for even still fighting at the end of the season, unlike
yes,
Florida.
yeah. Well, despite how they have started, and I do give Wisconsin props for giving Luke Fickle they're committed to the next year. I mean, that's a hard schedule, man. And compared to all those other teams, do you think Wisconsin is going to get a big portion of the big recruits in the Big Ten? Probably not. So it's like you kind of have to have realistic expectations. Also, another quick thing. Today, I saw an update a little bit ago that Florida State is not going to fire Mike Norvell. I don't know how I really feel about that, to be honest with you, just because it's like basically really crappy year, really great year, really crappy year, really great year, and it really shouldn't be like that. It's like, how has there not been a little bit more stability or, like I get like you're not going to be able to compete for a championship maybe every year anymore. But why is there such a huge disparity between your successful years and because it's either really good or really bad with him. And so honestly, I kind of am surprised because I think Florida State, like, just think about this. If Florida State had moved on from him, I think James Franklin may be off the table. But with some of the coaches that are available, I do think Florida State is a premium job. I think I would maybe even take that. I don't know. Would you take the Florida State job or the Florida job?
Florida.
Do you think twice about it though? Just because SEC versus ACC, the path of least resistance to go win a championship.
That would be the only reason I would consider Florida State.
Yeah,
But ultimately, I think, and this is what a lot of people have talked about, Billy Napier left the Florida job in a better place in terms of resources and all that. I think it's
well,
better
he probably did.
prestige. And yeah, I would still take the Florida job. But I understand that it's
I just
debatable.
think Florida State could even match what they could do as far as resources, or maybe even more. I don't know. Um, if I'm not mistaken, I think Florida State actually has more national championships than Florida does, and like I think Florida State is like I forgot when they were or instated in the NCAA, but I think Florida's been around substantially longer. But anyway, I think that'd be an interesting debate. But I guess, needless to say, I think they could have done hire. I think they could have hired a better coach this offseason if they were to just get rid of Mike Norvell. What's the expectations for them next year with him? You know,
I get it. The only thing I'll say is, could they do better whenever we're seeing a lot of coaches not leave their jobs?
yeah,
Granted, you don't have to get a huge name. You just need that next hot name. So maybe like the Tulane's head coach,
that's
somebody
true.
that can be the next big coach. So I don't know. I actually don't mind it. But I get it. Mike Norvell has had time, and his time has not been great
Yeah.
other than a couple of years. I think everyone knows, though, at least, like next year will be his last chance. He's got to do something.
Hmm.
So, uh, whatever is what it is. And yeah, I guess that's all I had to say about Florida State. But
Hmm.
the
Yeah,
last
that's
thing
all
I'll
I
say
can
about last week in the schedule, I guess we need to maybe finish up with the Big 12. BYU handling business against Cincinnati. Didn't
do.
watch any of the game, but I know that some people were predicting Cincinnati to upset them, and everyone's kind of been predicting that against BYU. BYU continues to take care of business on the road, and then at the same time, I'll bring up, and this was a game I watched in full, Kansas State versus Utah. This game was absolutely insane.
Oh
Utah was
yeah,
down, then at
yeah,
one point, just endless scoring. Utah keeping their playoff hopes and dreams alive. Going to be a very interesting conference. There is definitely a case to be made. They get three teams in. I don't know how they'd really do that, but Utah keeps winning. BYU keeps winning. I think BYU is probably going to get in, even with that loss to Tech. I'm assuming they lose to Tech at the end of the year, and then Utah will be one of those first teams out. But Utah's good. Yeah, watch out for them. Watch
yeah.
out for them.
Utah is good, man. very surprised that they, were even in that situation yesterday.
Right. No, agreed. Agreed. And Kansas State, I'll give them credit. They've kind of figured it out. They're 5-5. They had I remember watching them early in the season. They were just very bad.
Hmm.
So they found ways to be more competitive. So good for them.
Yeah,
But I am curious. This last week is going to be exciting because there is a lot of very interesting scenarios that could play out in terms of just crazy upsets that could happen. And then you have tiebreakers the committee's got to consider. And I just have to say, I I think maybe I get they're trying to be inclusive, but I don't see the need to have that group of five team in there every year.
yeah, I
You know,
know. Unless it makes sense, yeah. Like
right.
if this year it's like everybody's got two losses or something like that. And however, would it be very interesting for them to be there and maybe what? But what's the realistic expectation? Maybe depending on who they match up with the first game, maybe they have a shot. Other than that, I think it's a waste of a space for another team that deservedly maybe I'm not just saying this for the Texas thing, but if there's like a three-loss team or another second-loss team that, depending on the schedule or whatever, it just didn't go their way as much as it could have. I don't know. I would much rather have that than a group of five school, like you're saying.
And don't forget, they're going to be in that 12th spot every year. So that means they have to go to whoever number five is on the road for their first game.
Yeah,
So that's the thing. If you want to do something, I don't know what this would be, but if you want to do something for that group of five team where they get they're guaranteed like the best bowl that is not the playoffs, or maybe like
yeah.
next year they are guaranteed to start somewhere a little higher in the rankings to help them in their chance. I don't know. I don't know what it would be, but
Well,
at the
the
end of the
last time that I can even think of, like, I think at the time UCF was a group of five school, if I'm not mistaken. But when they beat
yeah,
LSU with Scott Frost, that was the last time off the top of my head I can think of like a group of five school actually like, holy crap, wow. And at that time, I think it was just a bowl game. But that is a very, very good point. Like, should they just have arguably the chance to go to the best bowl outside of the playoff? I think that would be better. Just because maybe once every 10 years, a team from the group of five might be able to beat the playoff team, like a group of uh, Power Four school. They may be able to do that, but I don't know.
yeah. Well, I continue to say and I think they are going to make some changes to the playoffs. I think you've maybe already seen they're talking about a 24 team playoff, which I know sounds absurd. I thought it was really absurd when I first heard it. I will say, after looking at the way it would work, I kind of get it, but I don't know if I want to discuss that right now. But here's the deal: they do have to figure something out because what would stop an SEC team or a Big Ten team from saying, you know what, it's too hard to make the playoffs in this conference. Let's go to the ACC or some other conference where it's easier to win. Like, what's the point of being in the SEC when it's
No,
harder? And we have more losses than maybe an ACC team that's going to
exactly.
get in.
Well, that's kind of what's happening now, and even next year. Yeah.
Right. So that is something to think about and consider. But a lot of that is going to be discussed over the next couple weeks. And it is going to be, I'm really looking forward to this week. And obviously, we have the conference championships and the playoffs start. It feels like football is about to get very, very exciting.
Oh, for sure.
And yeah, that's kind of all I have on this week. I'm looking forward to our preview next week. We're going to have a lot to talk about. Is there
Oh, for
anything
sure.
else you want to say in terms of this past week or anything else you'd want to discuss?
No, I don't think so. But like you said, it's going to be a huge, huge week, man. Huge week. It's very exciting. It's always my favorite week of the year, to be honest. So I'm very excited for it. Stay tuned for the preview show.
For sure. Okay. All right. Well, I will talk to you in a few days then.
Yes.
All right. See you.
See you.